Hi everyone, so we're looking at part 2 of ethnicity, ethnic distribution. Our objective is to explain the distribution of ethnic groups in the United States. So urban distribution, again remember we're talking about urban areas, cities, we largely will see our African American or Black American and Hispanic populations. An ethnic neighborhood is an area in a city containing many members of the same ethnic background. And we often see this because people want to be near other people who are like them, or often cluster together for culture, for feelings of safety and protection, all kinds of different reasons. If we look at Los Angeles, for example, look at your little key on the side here. So our orangey color is African American, our red is Asian American, purple is Hispanic or Latino, the beige is white, and the white or grayish color is no majority group. So we're talking about we have at least 50% of the population in that neighborhood is belonging to that particular ethnic group. So we see a lot of space is largely occupied by Hispanic people. We also see a significant band here of neighborhood occupied primarily by African Americans. We see dispersed clusters of Asian Americans. And then on the coastal areas, because remember the coast is the most expensive, the most exclusive, we see the vast majority of our white populations, or the vast majority of this is occupied by our white populations. Just a reminder, this is not to say that there aren't poor white people and that all of our ethnic minorities are poor. By no stretch am I saying that. But when we look at the more expensive land, what we see is that this tends to be more occupied by white people. Inner city tends to be more occupied by minority groups. But we definitely see some places further inland that either have no majority at all, or we see white populations. So looking at reasons for U.S. ethnic distribution, and I know we're looking at China here, and we see very many of the many Chinese ethnicities. They are not all Chinese, but we have Chinese, Thai, Turkic, Burmic, Manchu, Tungus, Tibetan, Mongolian, Hmong, Korean, Khmer, Tajik, Bai, Tujia, or their sparsely populated areas or our uninhabited areas. So we see a lot of different groups, a lot of diversity in China. So we first want to look at international migration. We know that most of our Black community is largely occupying Southeast. It's concentrated in Southeast United States, and this is for a very particular reason. And it comes primarily through the forced migration of enslaved peoples from Africa, triangular trade. We also will see later on, and in other populations, voluntary migration from Latin America and from Asia. In the late 20th and 21st centuries, this is primarily where we see those, and we talked about this in the migration chapter. So starting especially in the 1970s, we see a lot of Hispanic or Latino people from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and we see a lot of people from Asia migrating to the US, especially China, India, and the Philippines. If we look at our Hispanic population and our Asian American population by country of origin, we see, let's look at Asian first. We see almost a quarter of our Asian population is coming from China. Nearly 20% is coming from the Philippines, pretty close for India, and then 10% and under from Vietnam, Korea, Japan, and everywhere else. For our Hispanic population, over half, 63%, coming from Mexico. we see a pretty significant population coming from Puerto Rico. Remember, they are Americans, but they also may see themselves as another country, but it is an American territory. They are American, as well as Puerto Rican. We see a lot of other people from different Caribbean islands, a lot from Central America, and then kind of split up between the rest of South America, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba. All right, in your notes, I want you to take a little bit of time and draw an outline of the United States, and I'll have it up on the screen in just a second. Leave yourself some space around it. You're going to use arrows to show where ethnic groups are coming from and where they are settling, and I want you to label who they are, where they're coming from, where they're going, and why. And you'll see this will all be up on the screen, but I highly urge you to put this in your notes. This is the US. I know it's shocking. You've seen it a few times. Okay, so we're going to start east to west. So into the southeast, we have our African immigrants. And again, remember, forced migration. These are people who are enslaved. They are coming from largely West Africa, or at least immediately from West Africa. They are going to the southeast, and their why is slavery. Our Latinx and Hispanic community, they are coming from Mexico, from Central and South America. They are going to the Southwest, and their why is economics. And our Asian population, coming from China, the Philippines, and India, they are going to the West Coast, reason economics. And again, remember that each of these is going to settle in a particular spot, because proximity, you go to where is closest. Obviously, we're fairly far from Africa and Asia and parts of Latin America, but they go to the closest to them spots. Okay, so internal migration. Started out with international, now we're looking at internal. For African Americans, we see a lot of interregional migration, migration between regions, from one region to another. In the 1900s, what we see is that a lot of southern farms are still not enslaving, but they still have sharecroppers who are black. And these often are former slaves, former enslaved peoples, or the descendants of enslaved peoples. This is 40 to 100 years after the end of slavery in the United States, after Emancipation Proclamation. We see shrinking agricultural jobs, fewer people working on farms, and an increase in industrial jobs, which are largely located in the cities, so people go to where the jobs are. Number one reason we migrate is economic opportunity, including jobs. From the south, they're going to go basically everywhere, but to some very particular spots. In the northeast, highest numbers are going to New York City, but we're also getting significant immigration to Boston and Philadelphia. In east central United States, they're going to Detroit most commonly, but also to Cleveland. In west central, mostly to Chicago, but also to St. Louis. In the west, mostly to Los Angeles, but also to San Francisco. There's going to be further interregional or intra-regional migration here after this, but these are our big primary flows. All right, add to your USA map, that one that you were just drawing. So you want to add the internal migration of African Americans or of Black Americans. Label the who, from where, to where, and why. Same as before, except for now we're talking internal. All right. So from southern farms to northern cities. And often this is what becomes what we now refer to as ghettos. Why? Jobs, economic opportunity. but they're still relegated largely to the lower paying jobs, lower wage jobs, forced into particular neighborhoods, often neighborhoods that are not well maintained, and this is what will become ghettos. Okay, that's it. So define, again, you don't really have to define ethnicity in your own words, but you can. We did that before. This is just an add-on to it, but I want you to describe how international and internal migration lead to the modern ethnic distribution in the United States. How did that historic migration lead to where people are distributed today? Okay, have a great day. Bye.